tell me where are you from?
I'm from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. My family is originally from Rio. I moved to Canada in 2007, and I haven't told that yet, Steve, but I have a son, 3 years old.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, and it's called Sam,
Yeah.
and he's a fantastic kid, like super fun, and yeah, like I consider Sam my family now.
Okay, so let me ask you, how many languages do you speak?
Two, Portuguese and English, but I can understand a little bit of Spanish and Italian.
Okay, let me ask you, what's the first thing that comes into your mind when I say America?
Like honestly, like as a Brazilian, we were heavily influenced by American culture. I think it was Reagan, like they had that policy, America for the Americans,
Uh-huh.
and America really worked hard to make sure that most of the American, including Latin America, was under the American influence. And we grew up like looking up to the American. So, your question was what I think about America. So,
Yeah.
as I said, we had like a huge influence of the Americans and movies and culture in general, music, and like actually American was always that big daddy, like things that we looked forward as like the highest, the apps of
Yeah.
like development in the world actually. Of course we knew about Europe, but because of all the cultural influence, we always look upwards to the US way more than anywhere else.
So let me ask you, what do you think the major differences are between Brazil and America?
Fun enough, like if I may confess, in Brazil, I've never seen a rich black person. In the US, I saw black people being like, well, for like black people not necessarily mean poor. In Brazil, basically that was a synonym. So that means that culturally, like Brazil had way more slaves than the U.S.
Uh-huh.
And the slavery finished after the U.S. U.S. was one of the first ones like to abolish it. Brazil continued after that, and after the slavery was abolished in Brazil, the slaves were no longer a property. They were just like kicked off from the farms, but they didn't have anywhere to go, and no one was responsible for shelter, health, education of those guys anymore, and they end up being a side of the society and living in misery. Like in the US somehow, even though of course US is not perfect, I think that they did a better job in assimilating black people than in Brazil. I know, of course, that there's issue a huge gap, but in Brazil there is misery. Like in the U.S., not as much, and I would attribute like mostly like of course because of the slavery and how things worked out. And the second thing is that the colonization that people had in the U.S. was a colonization of people that went to the US went to have a better life in the US. The Europeans went there and said, I will make this a better place than Europe. Like I will make this and this is the principle that the US was founded, right? Was like to be the beacon of like hope and environment for the entire world. In Brazil, we had that mentality that Europe or the US like were the leaders, and we were just exploited.
Uh-huh.
People were going to Brazil to make money and take the richness away. So US broke up from England and said like, you know what, like this is not working. and we are not going to accept this. And with Brazil happened much later, but that people never try to make Brazil their home. Like we have like the wealthy families always sent their kids to study in Europe, later in the US, but and the Brazilian culture itself and the prestige was never developed. Like they always looked somewhere else. US tried to be the best place, the place to that people would look up and say like that is the place that I wanna be, like the American dream type
Yeah.
of thing. No one ever thought about the Brazilian dream. Like that was
Yeah.
not a thing, never. So that American dream, I think that was the biggest difference. Wherever, like, and Brazilians, lots of Brazilians went still go to the U.S. legally and illegally in the hope of a better life. And this is what American means for a lot of Brazilians, a better place with less corruption and more like a meritocracy. Like if you put your hard work, you're gonna be recognized for that. And in Brazil, unfortunately, is more like who you know, who is your come from, like will determine how far you're gonna be in life. Like in the U.S. again, you can be a self-made man. In Brazil, it's much harder.
I want to ask you what enters your mind when I say American food,
Sure.
and please be brutally honest.
Like, well, to be honest, like you think American food, you think about chain restaurants. Like for me, like Cheesecake Factory, like Outback, and Red Lobster, McDonald's. Like that is what you consider the staple of the food of the U.S.
Yeah.
And that is kind of like yeah, like it's great, but it's not good for you. And people like the oversize of things like in the US, like it's just not good for your health, and people just get too used to drive their cars everywhere and eat too much and drink too much, and not healthy food. And it is good because it's good food, but like it's tasty, but is it actually good for you, for your soul, for like a long term? Not really. So I try to actually avoid what I consider American food, to be honest.
Okay, so the next thing I wanted to ask you about, like, I think I'll use Brazil. I know you have dual citizenship, but if I was to visit Brazil as an American, what would be your advice to me? What's your best advice to visit Brazil?
Okay, keep yourself in the right side of the tracks.
Yeah.
Like, of course, you can. I have friends that likes to really explore and experience the culture, but to be honest, like especially because of my parents, like I was not allowed to go to the community of the favelas, they have for example the samba schools that each Islam have their own culture and their own samba school that they display in the avenue during the carnival, and those Islams are controlled by drug dealers, and if you go to one of those situations, you are going to a situation that the regular police, the regular government has no control. So several of those situations are sketchy. You, if people don't like you, you may get in trouble. So I try to be in those dangerous situations, but it is a dangerous place. You cannot always be on the right side of the track. Like for example, I was I had two cars stolen at gunpoint in Rio.
Really?
Like you going business, visiting a factory of a friend, like for business, like, and like live in a factory that was not in the safe neighborhood, like a car full of bullet holes, like crossing mine, and like four guys with like big guns, get out, get out, get out. They were like you running from like some type of confrontation with the police, I guess, like, and they were like their blood was hot. Like if I made any move or any wrong move, I would be shot on the spot.
Yeah.
And like of course you want to try to avoid that type of scenario.
Yeah.
And violence is just like part of the life over there, and everybody that lives there has an experience with violence, and like to an American, like of course we want tourists to have a great experience and try to get in trouble like that. So yeah, like make sure that you get good transport from the airport to the hotel, enjoy the safe areas, enjoy the good restaurants, enjoy the great food, go to the tourist points with the right transport, minimize the risk, right?
Yeah.
Like, and that can be thought ahead of time. You don't need to try to be too adventurous. Like, try to think about your safety.
Okay. Last question.
Yep.
If you could visit anywhere in the world, anywhere, where would it be? Like one,
Well,
you could only choose one place.
I'll say Greece, and fortunately, I'll be there in a few days.
Good, good.
Like it has been my bucket list for a very long time, and I think that for me it will be like a dream come true. Like
Yeah.
I always heard of wonderful things. I've been in Europe several times, but I've never been to Greece, and the fact to explore Athens and the islands for me like would be like a huge highlight in my life, I guess, and I'm really looking forward to that.
So I just want to tell everybody where we are right now. We're in Turkey.
Here in Turkey.
Very wonderful country. Thank you.
Have been blessed. My pleasure, Steve.